So, just to catch everyone up, it was big news over the weekend that Bernie Sanders defended his support for Joe Biden over Cornel West to the media. He made appearances on both CNN and NBC to reiterate that Trump and the Republicans are an existential threat to democracy. And so, despite his fondness for Cornel, he feels the progressive community needs to unite around Joe Biden for 2024. So we've all seen those videos a million times by now. Breaking Points covered these developments yesterday, and here's what Krystal Ball had to say in response to Bernie's defense of Biden and criticisms for Cornel.
So there's two pieces of this. One part I actually agree with and one part I really disagree with. And I think profoundly goes against everything that he previously stood for and argued for. So the part I'll start with the part I agree on. I think he's basically correct about third parties. I think the only thing that Cornel West, Dr. West, who I love, admire, respect, whose politics I almost wholly and completely share, I think
we all say that, right? Cornel West, who I love and respect and admire and revere, is threatening to destroy America. He's always been a hero of mine. I just wish he wouldn't threaten to destroy America the way he's doing right now. But I love the man. I love the man very much. And I support everything he's for.
If only he weren't empowering the fascists.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Effectively, the only thing that his campaign will accomplish is, number one, helping to reelect Donald Trump, and number two, hurting the left.
Okay, the only thing that his campaign will accomplish is, one, helping to elect Donald Trump, and two, hurting the left. First, buying into the idea that the Green Party takes votes out of the Democrat column, more so than it simply opens up the process to people who would rather not vote for anyone or who would stay home in absence of a Green Party
which she knows.
option, which she knows. She's made that exact point in the past. So she knows that the spoiler argument is mostly bullshit. That's not to say there are no voters who would have voted for Biden if not for Cornel, but we know that that is, for the most part, not the case. And number two, hurt the left. So yeah, what left?
What left are you talking about? Like, it's such a clown show at this point. It's going to hurt the left. What left are you talking about? The sunscreen left? Right. The cowbell left?
Right,
like,
exactly.
what left? The left that has done absolutely nothing? And you can see how desperate they are to find something positive about what Biden did. I think that wasn't in this tape. I think it was Kyle talking about Afghanistan.
No, she gets to it here. She gets to it here.
Oh, yeah, Afghanistan. What? Trump wanted to get out of Afghanistan. The only argument that you've got there is the deep state was able to hamstring Trump because he doesn't know how the machinery works, whereas Biden was actually able to get out. He was able to get around the general sabotaging his foreign policy. Like, they tried to do that with Biden, but he's been around Washington, forever. So he knew how to actually get around that. Trump did not know how to get around that. But you're making it out like Trump was some war maniac. Like, oh man, yeah, he would have stayed. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? He was deeply skeptical of all of these interventions. And the fact that that's really all she can come up with, that says it all. How are we hurting the left? Like, how does that hurt the left?
Well, she'll give her explanation. Let's hear it.
Because ultimately, there's just a poll that came out that showed Biden and Trump basically tied in a head-to-head. You throw Cornel West in, and Trump is winning by like 5 points. And the margin is just exactly the amount that Dr. West takes away from Joe Biden. Now, listen, it's fully on Joe Biden that he needs to do more.
Yeah, they weren't neck and neck. Biden was already down by 2.
He's already losing. Right.
They were
and
down
then
by
he's
2,
down by more.
And he's down by 5 with Cornel West in the race. And Cornel West is at 4. Right. And there are 3% more undecideds with Cornel in the race than with Biden in the race. So it's not exactly clear where those Cornel votes came from. So we have to also think about the fact that Trump lost 2%, with Cornel in the race.
On Joe Biden that he needs to do more to appeal to potential Cornel West voters, but let's live in the land of reality of how this is going to work out. They're not going to do that. Dr. West will take some percentage, relatively small percentage, away from the Democratic total, and it makes it easier for Donald Trump to get elected. So if your priority is reelecting a Democrat, and if you believe, as I do, that Donald Trump...
Stop. If your priority is reelecting a Democrat, then he shouldn't run. Well, genius. If our priority was reelecting a Democrat, we'd vote for the fucking Democrat.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if your priority is reelecting a Democrat, then you should want Cornel out of the race. Well, no shit. No shit, right? Aren't the people voting for Cornel West because their priority is not reelecting a Democrat? It's so self-evidently ludicrous. What an absolutely ridiculous point. Well, you know, if you really want to elect a Democrat, you shouldn't vote for Cornel West. Yeah, no shit, of course. Of course. Yeah, right. I mean, it's unbelievable.
This is a moment that's really, really showing people's true colors and who they really are. Krystal is really sad. But, you know, it was only a year ago, I think, that I was describing her as the best spokesperson in the space for the left perspective. And it's amazing. It's very Invasion of the Body Snatchers with these people. I said when we had Shama on, Ilhan Omar looks to me like they fucking dragged her into the Senate cloakroom and gave her a frontal lobotomy. Like, she doesn't even look like the same person. What happens to these people? What happens to them? Like, do you have no shame, woman? You're contradicting everything you said for years. For years, we could pull out all of these radars and monologues you've done, arguing exactly the opposite of what you're arguing right now. Why should we care about electing Democrats? And honestly, we're going to get into this with the gray zone. I think that's part of it. I think they're at a level where if they really turn around and start talking that kind of shit, they don't want the system to turn on them, man. They don't want to start getting debanked. And, those people don't play. They don't play games, man. I think they're afraid of what the consequences will be. And that can highly motivate you. It's the Upton Sinclair line, to paraphrase a bit. A man has a tremendous capacity not to see a thing when his living depends upon his not seeing it. I think all of these people, there would be very severe financial repercussions for them if they started turning around and being like, everybody's got to come out for Cornel. Like, how would the establishment come at them if they did that?
And Joe Biden are not equivalent, that Joe Biden has been better in particular on economics, but also with things like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, then...
So Russell got into the Afghanistan thing earlier, obviously.
Yeah, I think
it shows you how thin the positive case is for Biden.
Right.
That's what you... the country we left like a fucking drunk stumbling out of the bar at 4 a.m?
Right.
That's the positive case?
Literally falling out of the sky because they were dangling to an airplane trying to flee with the airplanes that left. So you had people literally falling out of the sky. And of course, now with the sanctions we're putting on Afghanistan, we're starving people of Afghanistan. You might even be able to make the case, I don't know what the numbers are, but you might even be able to make the case they were better off during the war than they are now. Because now I think half of Afghanistan is hungry. It's some outrageous number like that.
Hang on, but we cared so much about the women and girls. Do you mean we're starving them now?
Right, yeah, exactly.
We had to not leave Afghanistan for the women and girls. Are you saying we never really gave a shit about the women and girls?
Sounds like it to me.
Or makes it more likely that Donald Trump gets reelected. And the reason why I say I think it will ultimately also hurt the left wing and left principles, if that's what you care about, is we have the model of 2016. Look, the theory in 2016 with Jill Stein was if we withhold our votes from the Democrats, and that's going to force them to the table, we're going to have a voice in the room, they're going to have to come to our side. No, that's not what they did. Instead, they demonized anyone who would have even considered Jill Stein. They used it to demonize the left. They used it to undercut any sort of leftward push. And so while I would love to imagine that theory of the case would work out, we've seen the reality, and that is not what happens.
All right. Now, I have to break down what she's saying here.
They get mean. They say mean stuff when you don't vote for them.
It's worse than that. Yeah, I have to break down what she's saying. What she's saying here is that the people who withheld their vote in 2016 and voted for Jill Stein, several of them did so. I can't say most, but a lot of people did so thinking that they were going to teach the Democrats a lesson. If we withhold our vote and we vote for Jill Stein, the Democrats will learn the lesson that they have to move left to win our votes again in 2020. And as she says accurately, they did not do that, right? Mm-hmm. So that is true, what she said there. The critical mistake that she makes is that she assumes that what we want as Green Party voters is a seat at the table or a voice in the room with the Democratic Party. Right. No, we don't want a seat at the table with the Democrats. We don't want a voice in the room with the Democrats. We are not trying, this is the key thing, we are not trying to influence the Democrats. We are trying to break the Democrats. We are trying to destroy the Democrats. Do you understand? So you're correct. Yes, anybody voting for Cornel West thinking, well, this is going to teach Democrats a lesson and they're going to nominate a progressive in 2028. Yeah, they are way off base. But that's not who you're talking to at this point when you're talking to Cornel West voters. Cornel West voters are voters who want to go to war with the Democratic Party. That's why we're Cornel West voters. We're not trying to teach anybody a lesson anymore. That's over. That's over. We've done that already. We've done that twice. And so what she says there is not wrong in its premise, but she's wrong in the follow-through, thinking that we have any interest in reforming the Democratic Party or teaching Democratic voters or Democratic leaderships lessons about how they have to be more progressive in the future. No. The goal here is to break them. Voting for Cornel West is how you break them. Wasting time in a rigged primary only to concede and endorse Biden in the general, which is what she wants Cornel West to do, that's not doing anything. That's doing nothing.
Well, in the end, with all these people, what you're seeing is all of this was never anything more than a pose, because it doesn't really make a difference to them. Krystal doesn't need health care. Krystal doesn't need higher wages, nor anyone that Krystal cares about or spends any time with. Nobody she knows needs these things. Nobody that she knows is in a position where they're going to lose their house. For these people, these positions have always been theoretical. And all this are libs who want to be cooler than libs. That's it.
Right.
Exactly. They're just it's they did a very interesting study in the 60s, and they found that the two sectors of society that had the most in common ideologically were the hippies and their parents. They answered questions in a poll most closely in terms of their values, their aspirations, their beliefs. It's the same thing. They're just libs for whom, being an MSNBC lib isn't cool enough. So they decided to go be like a Bernie Sanders lib. Well, once shit got real, once it turned into, well, clearly the Democratic Party is broken beyond repair and we have to fight it. Nah, that gets you kicked out of the lib club. They're not going to go there.
Now, the place where I profoundly disagree with Bernie Sanders is on...
So now she's going to tell us where she disagrees. So she gets this obviously completely backwards. And actually what she's about to say here is so stupid. I'm sorry. It is so stupid. She actually makes Bernie look reasonable in his stance, because what she would rather him do is so unbelievably idiotic that she actually makes Bernie look at least logical according to where he's coming from. So let's take a look.
His orientation towards the Democratic primary. And there's another section of this where he gets asked specifically about the Democratic primary. And he says, no, I think we need to unify behind Joe Biden because that will be what helps to defeat Donald Trump. Well, that's exactly the argument that was used against Bernie Sanders himself.
Yes.
Both in 2016 and again in 2020. Stop criticizing the Democrats. Stop criticizing the Democratic establishment. Stop running all together because you're sowing dissent and your, attempts at democracy here are really undermining our attempt to defeat Donald Trump. It was bullshit then and it's bullshit now. And the fact that he jumped in to endorse Joe Biden, a man that he knows is not living up to the, democratic, social democratic ideals that Bernie Sanders supports, is not living up to the bare minimum of really helping the working class or even meeting the promises that he himself made on.
I just said 2 minutes ago that it's important that Biden defeat Trump. And now I'm saying he hasn't done the bare minimum living up to his promises to support a sort of policy set that would benefit poor and working class people. She goes on.
The campaign trail, something that I know that Bernie Sanders is aware of because he just gave this big speech in New Hampshire with this direct critique of the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. But still, you jump and endorse him while there's a competitive primary going on? Listen, I understand. I'm not a fool. The realities of—
No. You are a fool. You absolutely are a fool. You are a damn fool. There is no competitive primary going on. There is no competitive primary going on.
There is no universe in which anybody who's running against Joe Biden would be allowed to become the nominee. And you know that. That's what's frustrating. You talk to some of these libs, and they really don't know the facts about Green Party voters answering in polls they just wouldn't vote. She knows better. She knows all this.
Biden is the incumbent. There are no competitive primaries launched against incumbents. The only one who made it remotely interesting in the modern era was Ted Kennedy against Jimmy Carter.
Right,
and even then, it was not close. It was not close. So you had a Kennedy against Carter, couldn't make it close. That's the only time it was even remotely competitive in the last 100 fucking years you're talking about. There is no competitive primary against Joe Biden. So what you would rather Bernie do than back Joe Biden is you would rather him back a certain dead-end candidate who she's about to name drop. We all know who it is. We'll let her say it first.
Who by the way, in that Emerson poll was polling 4%.
Exactly. That's what he would do if he were smart. It's just unbelievably ludicrous. Look, Bernie Sanders now functions as a Democrat, a progressive Democrat. He's really functionally no different than a Liz Warren at this point.
Sure.
Right? And so if you're a progressive Democrat...
he says shit.
All right, exactly.
That's never going to go anywhere.
If you're a progressive Democrat at this point, your goal is to reelect Joe Biden because he is the prohibitive frontrunner in the primary. He is basically the presumptive nominee at this point, even though primaries have not started yet. Your goal is to reelect a Democrat. You have an incumbent Democrat. If you're a progressive Democrat, that's your goal. Like, it makes sense. What he's doing makes sense according to the role that he actually plays. For all his talk about revolution and all that bullshit, he always was just a progressive Democrat. That's what Chris Hedges said about Bernie Sanders from the beginning. If your goal is to reelect a Democrat at this point, it makes perfect sense that you would endorse Joe Biden. Like, I don't like it, but that makes sense according to what he actually is and what he actually wants to do.
Sure.
What sense does it make for him to pick one of these dead-end, no-chance primary challengers? But let's hear her make the case here.
What, to embarrass himself and to undermine his credibility more than he already has?
Exactly.
Look at what you have done to your credibility. I mean, nobody with some of these stations, we have people who pay attention to their numbers. Nobody seems to pay attention to their numbers. I'm curious if where they are now compared to where they were a year ago in terms of how many people actually watch their videos. I know I personally, look, I still say because they have more resources than most people doing this thing, that they're a good source of headlines and information, like just to know what stories are on the pipeline and circulating out there without literally, look, I cannot, as bad as she's gotten. I actually, and a lot of people have said this, I like Sagar more at this point. It's like a spike in my head to watch CNN. Like that's not an option. I cannot watch that. So there's still a good resource for that. But even so, I do not watch them nearly as much as I used to. Like, they used to be my real go-to for headlines. I can't imagine I'm the only one who's kind of phased them out.
Let's hear her make the case as to what Bernie should have done.
Okay, for him to endorse the candidate, Marianne Williamson, who most closely matches his own ideology, I get the way that would make it impossible for him to, have any sort of influence with the White House, et cetera, et cetera. But you didn't have to do anything. You could have just stayed out. And if you really believe your rhetoric,
Why would he just stay out? Why? His goal as a progressive Democrat is to help Democrats win, which means helping unite the party behind Joe Biden. Again, I'm not sympathetic to that goal, but it's very clear that's his goal. And so if that's his goal, then by far the most logical thing to do would be to come out early and endorse Joe Biden. Like, it's a no-brainer if that's your goal. I'm not saying I like the goal, but that's a no-brainer. She's saying, why didn't he stay out and I understand if he endorsed Marianne, that'd be too much, but why couldn't he just keep his mouth shut? Why should he keep his mouth shut? So that Marianne Williamson could tease a possible Bernie endorsement all year so that you guys could continue to grift off of her campaign by making it sound to more people that there's some chance? Why would he keep hope alive for a hopeless campaign? What to whom does he who does he owe it to do that? Why would he do that? So this is what I mean. She has it completely backwards. Bernie did a shitty thing, and she defended what was shitty about what he did, and now she's criticizing what was rational about what he did, right? Like she takes issue with what makes sense about what he did, yet she is very sympathetic to the sort of worst reasoning about what he did. Just completely backwards.
About what needs to be done to defeat.
Yeah, if you're not actually going to challenge the Democratic Party, why get involved in these joke campaigns?
Right, exactly.
That's
why
where
didn't you fake it for us? Why didn't you fake it?
So
that we could get more views and subs out of the Marianne Williamson campaign. That's what she's saying.
Why didn't you help us pretend there was a primary?
Exactly. Yes.
So that we could feed off the false drama.
Exactly.
Of an actual contest.
Yes.
You look at this and you just say, like, and I guess without knowing her personally, we can't answer this. Does she believe this? Like, look, no matter what you think of her, she's a very smart woman. Does she believe that her fucking ridiculous staff abusing Course of Miracles bullshit, not even good enough to start a real cult friend, is a credible candidate? Has she talked herself into that? Is she just in such a bubble of wealth and privilege that she really thinks Marianne Williamson is a credible candidate for the presidency that people should be touting and getting behind? Like, does she? Or is she just purely trying to, at this point, to save her credibility by pretending it was a good idea all along, only they got betrayed by the Bernie Sanderses who should have gotten behind it? Like, is she just trying to save face at this point?
That seems like the narrative she's going to try and spin. But let's let her finish. This is only a few more seconds.
Could have just stayed out. And if you really believe your rhetoric about what needs to be done to defeat Donald Trump, then actually you would endorse and fight for Marianne Williamson, because she is the person who is carrying the mantle of his political project.
If you really believed in your rhetoric, you would have endorsed Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson recently had 7, not 1, not 2, not 3, 7 ex-campaign staffers publish a letter which Jen Dyes put out on her Substack saying that not only was Marianne Williamson a nightmare to work for, but that Marianne Williamson has no interest in even getting on the ballot in enough states to win the Democratic primary. You had a letter signed by 7 former staffers at great personal risk to themselves because they were breaking the NDAs by talking like this. That's why they didn't reveal their names. But if it ever comes out who they are, they could be in some legal hot water. They leaked to the press that not only is she a nightmare to work for, but that she has no interest in becoming the nominee. She is not interested in doing the legwork to get on the ballot, i.e., signature collecting, petitioning. You know why? Because you can't get invited on podcasts sending people out to get signatures. That's the less glamorous part of campaigning, right? She's not interested in making those investments. So you're telling me he should have endorsed a candidate who has made clear to her own staff, so much so that they, at great personal risk to themselves, leaked a letter to the media saying this is not a real campaign, this is a giant grift. That's what Bernie Sanders should have done, as opposed to endorse Joe Biden. That's what he should have done? That if you want to make a moral argument as to what Bernie should have done if he were for real, if Bernie Sanders were for real,
Cornel West.
he'd have run as an independent in 2016 if he were for real. At this point, if you wanted to save face, you back Cornel West, if anybody.
Right.
She's pissed that he didn't back Marianne Williamson, who's not interested in getting on the ballot. She has no interest in becoming the president. It is a vanity campaign. It is a book tour campaign. That's not my words. Those are the words of people who worked for her. 7 people who worked for her. Not 1 or 2 disgruntled ne'er-do-well. No. 7 staffers said that. So how you can come on here and say that actually the appropriate action for Mr. Sanders to have taken was, if you really believed in what you're saying, you'd have endorsed Marianne Williamson. Just mind-boggling. I'm sorry. That is one of the top 5. That maybe not number 1. I don't know. I don't have him ranked in my head right now. That's got to be top 5 dumbest monologues in this space in recent memory.
Yeah, not only that, when you look at what staffers who have spoken anonymously because of the notorious NDAs that Marianne slaps on the people she works with, it's very consistent with the kind of abuse people in cults experience. It's very, they all warn people, don't get involved in her campaign. It was a nightmare. I went in so hopeful. I believed in her. A lot of them had read her books and been inspired by her books. And you just don't get that kind of consistent account. Again, not this campaign cycle, not last campaign cycle, 30 years. 30 years of people telling the same story. And again, Krystal has to know this. She has to know this. And what? You're just not going to tell people any of this? Or you're going to pretend that none of this went on?
Yeah, no one in that Marianne sphere has ever even acknowledged that letter. Not Kyle, not Krystal, not the Vanguard guys. The Vanguard guys said, oh, yeah, we'd be interested in looking into it. Never did. Right?
Right.
No one.
Right.
No one.
Right.
Please clap.